Horsey, horsey, don't you stop. Just let your feet go clippity-clop. Your tail will go swish and the wheels go round. Giddy up, giddy up, giddy up, we're home.
Walk on, walk on. Poop, 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 poop. Do you remember the wind in the willows? Do you remember Toad's reaction to the car that went whizzing by him when he was out for the first time in his horse-drawn caravan? He thought it was the best thing he'd ever seen. He thought he'd wasted years of his life by not having one. He abandoned the horse and caravan. But the horse and cart is probably one of the best forms of transport ever contrived. It doesn't pollute, doesn't make any noise to speak of. It can carry goods or people. It can get over rough terrain. It doesn't burn fossil fuels. And without having to steer it, you can get you home from the pub when you've had a few. Come on, walk on. And what comes out of its rear end makes your roses grow. Walk on, come on, walk on.
We're just like Toad.
Good boy.
We've killed the horse in favour of that whizzing heap of metal. What fools we are. We've killed much more than just the horse.
We killed off the horse and the whole way of life to make way for this. Look what comes out of the rear end of these things. Makes your roses come on a tree. Well, can you hear me? Can you hear the birds? Can you hear yourselves?
We only put up with all this noise and tearing about because we have to. There are those, I know, who love it and are climbing walls if they have to spend more than half a day away from it. But there are millions of us who can't wait to get away from it all. But because of the way the world works, we can't. We're trapped.
This is Bury in Lancashire, where I was born. It's just one of the many towns round here where the plague of progress first caught a hold. A progress that killed off the horse and the peasant and the village forever.
Bury is like any other town in this country. Not so long ago, it was a village on the River Irwell. And then the great and glorious Industrial Revolution came, Toad's Revolution, and destroyed it. Bigger and better became the cry. King Cotton had arrived. The cotton barons lured the peasants from the surrounding villages and changed a lifestyle that had existed for thousands of years. Generations of peasant life came to an end. Industry promised us a better life. What it gave us was this. But it did give the cotton barons a better life. They made their money and lived where? Why, in the peace and quiet of the countryside, of course, away from all this appalling desecration.
And this is what they gave us in return, or what we had to make for ourselves. It's a municipal park, sort of a hybrid cross between a garden and the actual countryside, brought into the town or the city in place of the real thing. You can find peace and quiet here, but it's an invented peace and quiet.
Before the car and easy excursions, here was your only chance of getting back to anything that resembled the life you craved. You could sit here and look at the real countryside just up there where your heart and soul belonged. For generations we lived in a garden. We need the peace, we need tranquility. And this is a better life.
I'm gonna make a good show of ice, shining steel, tempered in the fire. We'll chop you down like an older tree, dirty old town. found.
This is Walnut Avenue, where I lived until I was about 11. This avenue, a name designed to conjure up the countryside, and a few avenues either side of it, was my village. It was a small, intimate community. Down here and left at the junction was the school, and right at the junction was the shops. And opposite the shops was the Sunday school. And this was it. My world. I felt safe here. I knew where I was. I knew everybody, and everybody knew me. I don't know who K and V Coulson are, but when I was a boy, Mrs. Hughes had this shop with its aroma of dusty, soil-covered potatoes. We used to come here and buy sweet-smelling bundles of kindling. It was the first shop I ever remember going to on my own.
The vast majority of us have similar feelings about our youth. Nearly all of us had a small village upbringing, regardless of whether or not we lived in a village. The intimacy of our beginnings, the couple of streets, the corner shop, the names of the neighbours, all served as a village for us. We are village people. We function better in a small community because we care for it, and it cares for us. And this is where I live now, down there on the Somerset Levels. I chose here not because I looked round for the perfect village, but simply because it's convenient for me to live round here, and it's quiet. The only real stipulation I made when deciding where to live was that it couldn't be in a town.
This is Glastonbury Tor. Down there is Glastonbury itself. Local people tell me that the town died about 25 years ago with the hippie invasion. But I think most towns died about then, when the post-war development really got started. And the planners began to have visions, God bless them. Obviously all those funny cigarettes they smoked in the 60s.
As you can see, what was once a small country town is rapidly becoming a general sprawl. And from here you can see that the planners are making their presence felt. I'm not proposing that we don't change our villages and country towns. We have to change in order to survive. Maybe we should change them back to the way they were, the way they worked for centuries. I'm not suggesting the chocolate box village, far from it. I'm not saying that bringing in business like we have here is a bad thing, quite the opposite. It's a lifeblood. It creates employment, it creates wealth. The problem is the scale of this kind of development. If you bunch it all together like this, the first thing that happens is that you create traffic problems. The next thing the good planners of Glastonbury will be considering is a ring road. What was once a good idea on paper suddenly becomes a nightmare to live with.
The same mistakes are being made here as in the large towns. For instance, they've just opened this supermarket, which is of course taking away business from the shops in the town and the surrounding villages. In my own village, once a week, a free bus comes, picks people up, brings them to the doorstep of the supermarket, and then takes them back home again. Brilliant idea. If you happen to own the village shop, you may think differently. Village shops are closing by dozens a day. This enormous man-made desert is soon to be an industrial and housing estate. The trouble is that the planners and designers of our country towns don't think about the overall effect of their schemes, or so it would seem to me. Why, instead of putting everything here, didn't they think about spreading it around the villages? That's how it used to be.
This is Mere. It's an old village. By about the 12th century, the village system in England was setting its pattern. Communications and transport worked well, if slowly, and the society, the pecking order, was established. This particular building was the Abbot of Glastonbury's summer palace. At the other end of the scale were the serfs and the peasants and the farmers, and then came the landowners and the squires. It worked well for centuries. For some it wasn't great, yes, far better to be a squire than a farm labourer, but the system worked, and it worked well.
The community provided for each other's needs. If you wanted a chair, the carpenter made you one. If you wanted food, the farmer grew it for you. If you wanted your horse shod, the blacksmith shod it. And if you wanted a drink, the brewer made it. And if you wanted God, the clergy were on hand to introduce you to him.
It was only with the coming of the Industrial Revolution that the village began to be drained of the craftsmen and women. They moved to the towns, lured by the promise of wealth, or the hope of wealth. And just as today, there too went the young, in search of not only wealth, but excitement, bright lights, bright shining lights. And the villages declined for a century or more. And then came the car. The roads were improved. Such freedom had never been known before. We could go wherever we wanted in warmth and comfort, and at speeds undreamt of by our forefathers. The trouble is, most of us want to go to the same place at the same time. And the village became a dormitory, where the rich and the old sleep, and dream the nightmares that are life in Britain in the 1990s. The towns and cities of the British Isles have become like the visions of Hades, and the village, eternal sleep.
While you snore, the traffic roar is getting ever greater. On English downs, the market towns are called by excavator. Sweet Avalon is clinging on, but soon the planner's dreams will vandalize King Arthur's prize with more newfangled schemes. Till one by one the fields have gone and people grow to hate her. Goats and sheep we'll one day keep enclosed in our museum. We'll pay our quids and take the kids so they get chance to see 'em. While streets designed with horse in mind are jammed by cars and vans, they all assail the old and frail and wreck their shopping plans. While England dies 'neath fume-filled skies, the planners rise to sing Laudamus Te Deum.
I'm not putting this forward as the perfect village, happens to be my village, but it does still have some of the qualities that made a village. It has small industries, just like the old villages, only today they're all grouped together, just like they were in Glastonbury. Yep, it's an industrial estate, but it's the scale of it that matters.
I know it's not very pretty, perhaps that could have been taken into consideration, but it doesn't intrude. It's small, it doesn't spoil the village. There's employment here for local people. Instead of the smithy, there's light engineering. Instead of the carter, there's a forklift truck business. Instead of the wheelwright, there's a plumbing business. And a few yards down the road, there's a carpenter and timber products company. And next door, there's a general stores that sells anything from saddles to screws and cattle feed to cardigans.
A broom and a rake and a garden chair, a pond or a lake, now that'll go where? Can we afford a jardiniere or two? Poison sprays for killing weeds, gloves and boots and bulbs and seeds, everything the gardener needs to do. Moors to push, moors to ride, gnomes with brush, gnomes astride. Goodness me, we need a guide, for it's all inside the village general store. Knives and forks and pots and pans, kettles, sieves and watering cans, barbers for the countryman's attire. Saddles, crops and general tack, everything for the young girl's hack. Riding hats, they're up the back, they're swire. Tubs of nails in great supply, trusty scales that never lie. Step inside for DIY, there's lots to buy in the village general store.